Gila is a non-profit. Our mission is to advance the professionalism of Hawaii's landscape industry through advocacy, communication, education, and fellowship. Today we're bringing you a video on Shindaiwa C350 weed eater. We're going to be looking at doing a maintenance and also at changing the fuel line. We hope you'll join us at Gila. To find out more, check us out at gilahawaii.com. Let's go to the bench. All right, let's start off with tools. First off here, we've got a needle nose pliers. Could be any old pliers, doesn't have to be needle nose. That's just gonna help us take off our spark plug boot a little easier without breaking it. We got a 3/4 or a 19mm deep socket wrench for removing the spark plug and installing the new one. We got side cutters. These are gonna help us clip off the old fuel lines, gonna help us trim those down and take the old ones off without damaging the carb. We've got a T-wrench. You could use this in place of that 3/4 socket for removing the plug. The screwdriver end is going to help us with the grommet when we go to change that or to remove that to change those lines. We've got a 11/16 or 17mm socket. Doesn't have to be deep here, it just happened to be a deep one. That's going to help take off the bolt for the gear case to grease it. Got a paper towel. We got a 4mm Allen wrench. It doesn't have to be exactly that size, but roughly around there is good. That's going to help us lock that string head when we remove it to put in that new grease. We got some WD-40. Not totally necessary, but it's going to help with the fuel lines and the grommet and making it easier to install and deal with. Then we have the grease. You're going to want to use lithium grease. You want high quality grease for that gear case. They're expensive to replace, so you want to put the good stuff, and you generally don't want to mix greases, so try to use the same stuff that it came with. Makes sense to actually buy the Shindaiwa stuff just to keep it consistent. You don't want to mix greases, it could cause them to fail. So let's get into the repair. First off, we're going to start with the air filter. We're just going to remove this cover. It's usually hand tight. If it's too tight, you can hit it with your needle nose and unlock it there. But usually you should be able to loosen that. It's got a few threads on there, but once you get those all off, the whole cover will just pivot off the top. Normally your air filter is going to look a lot dirtier than this. I had just changed this one before I started making this video, but either way, you're going to remove that quote-unquote old filter. You're going to set that aside. Then you're going to want to start to clean out the air box. So you can see a bunch of dirt left over in there. The first step is to close the choke. So choke on is choke closed, and that's going to push this little lever in the back to actually choke off the air there. And that's going to prevent a bunch of this dust from going in while we're cleaning it. So it's not completely closed off, but it'll keep enough of it out. You don't want to leave it open. It won't kill it, but you don't really want dirt going into the engine. It eventually will kill it. So I had compressed air here. I just kind of blew out around all these edges. Pays to be thorough, just get as much of that dirt out as possible. It is just a little foam filter. These engines were built really tough, so they didn't really give them much protection with the air filter. It's just a little piece of foam. So it pays to take your time and really clean it out and do this kind of frequently. Just keep this area clean. If you don't have compressed air, you can just hit it with that paper towel. Just clean it out. Spend a little time on it, get it as clean as you can. Pays off on engine life to not have all that dirt ingested into the engine there. Then we're going to take our new filter, line up the holes either way, go forward, backwards, side to side, just line up those holes there. We're going to press it in. The top has a little hole there that we're just going to line up with a little tab on the top. We're going to set it on there and then set it in and just tighten down that air filter screw. Really just need to go hand tight here. We don't need to make this guy too tight with the pliers or anything, not necessary. Next we're gonna go about removing the spark plug. So I had mine in my clamp here so I could tilt it towards me. I mainly just did that for the camera. You don't need to tilt it towards you. You want to rock that boot back and forth, and there's a little clip that's connecting it, and rocking it back and forth loosens that clip. If you just take it off, that clip might get stuck, might rip out of the boot and just make you a lot of trouble. So if you loosen it up that way, it just pops off easily with the pliers like I just did, and just gives you a little less work to do. Next we're gonna blow out that area. If you have access to that compressed air, you could just blow it out with your mouth if you need to, but you want to get as much dirt out of that area as you can before you remove that spark plug, otherwise gravity's going to be pulling more stuff into that engine. Put that 3/4 or 19mm socket on, and we are going to remove that spark plug. And when we go to install that new plug, we're going to take a look at the gap on the spark plug. So that new spark plug is going to be set between 0.6 and 0.7mm according to the manual. That's that gap between the side electrode and the center electrode there. So you just push on the plug or pull it out with the pliers to set that gap. Honestly, I wouldn't worry about that too much, but if you have a gauge, I'd check it. When you go to install this plug, make sure that you thread it in by hand first, and that you get a good 2, 3, 4 threads on there before you put on the wrench. It's a real bummer when you cross thread it. The head is aluminum, and then you force it with the wrench, you will ruin the head, and it will be very hard to repair. You will probably have to replace the cylinder, which is an expensive job. So it really pays to take your time and make sure that that spark plug is threaded in. So once that's in and tight with the wrench, we'll go ahead and put that boot back on. And that's it for spark plug. Let's take a look at the fuel filter. You'll go ahead and take that cap off. A lot of times there's a little tether here that attaches it. If you want, you can pull the tether all the way out. That might make it a little easier to deal with, and then drop it back in. This one was missing, so no bother there. But one tool I forgot to mention is this little retrieval tool. It's just made out of a little piece of wire. So you can probably live without this. You could use the long pliers, maybe anything that can get in there, but there is a fuel line hanging down into the tank that leads to the filter. So if you have a little tool like this, you can just snag it and go ahead and pull that out of the bottom here. Now this has a big old fuel filter, so it's a little harder to pull out. That's not actually the original fuel filter. It won't hurt anything being too big like that, but you'll see the new one's smaller. So we got our side cutters, and we're just gonna clip off that end there. And then I like to use the cutters and just pry against the bottom here and pull the clip off of the fuel line, just like that. So now that old fuel filter and that little piece of fuel line left there that I'm setting aside is just trash, but you definitely want to save that clip. You really need the clip on the end of this line. The new fuel filter is gonna feel tight when we install it, but if it doesn't have that clip, it tends to fall off pretty much every time you suck a bunch of junk up into that carb, and then you need a carb cleaning, so it's a bummer. So you can also see the reason we clip the line rather than just pulling it off is because it gets flared out, and we want that connection to be nice and tight. So I'm gonna use my WD-40 here and spray a little bit in there. That's gonna make it easier to push this new fuel filter on. Here's a new fuel filter. Sometimes they come with this little plastic piece on the top. You can remove that. We're gonna take our little clip and put it on the line a little bit back, and then we're gonna take the new fuel filter, and it's gonna be pretty tight, but we'll just work it on to the end here. So you can see I was struggling a little bit to install this, and that probably should have been a red flag to me, but I just went ahead and pushed it all the way on. And it turns out that this fuel line was actually too stiff to use. So if it's pliable, you're probably good. A lot of times it's gonna be stiff, and it's gonna make sense to change the line. I guess I didn't think it was too bad here, so I went ahead and installed it and put it back in. But I ended up having to retrace my steps there, and I'll show you that after. So now we're gonna add a little bit of fresh mixed fuel. You're gonna wanna use FD oil in your Shindaiwa in your mix. That's gonna help your engine last a lot longer. You'll see on the side of any kind of oil label, there'll be a little box. It'll say FB, FC, FD. You want it to say one of those, but you really want it to say FD. If it doesn't have any of those things, then you wanna avoid it. It's unrated and can do real damage to your engine. So then I flipped this over to work on the gear case, and that's when I found out that the fuel line had broken on the carb side and split, and it started leaking gas on the floor. So I turned it back over, and I'm gonna show you how to change that fuel line on both sides. This is where it split, and it was just leaking fuel right out of that top there. So like I said, I should have noticed a red flag, on the bottom, and the line was real stiff. But that's what ended up happening. So I'm gonna show you how to change that line. First, we're gonna start with the fuel cap. We're gonna take that off again and loosen this. We're gonna end up removing the grommet, which is just the basically the seal in the tank where the lines go through. So let's go ahead and remove that air filter cover too. Don't have to take this stuff off here that I'm taking off, but I think it makes it easier to see on the video, and it probably makes it easier to work on too. I probably would take it off. So we'll take off that air filter too. Then we're gonna go ahead and take off these two little screws, and this is gonna help us get more access down there. These screws strip kind of easy, so be careful with them. If they are stripped already, you can use a vice grip to you know, get them loose and just get this cover out of your way here. You can just slide that cover up the throttle cable to move it out of the way. And now we got a little better access to that grommet and those lines. So let's get our T-wrench, or any flathead screwdriver would do. We'll just kind of gently pry that line off of that side to remove that purge fuel line. Then we're going to push the tip into that grommet and carefully push it out by just prying against the side there. And then we can pull the whole thing out of the top. If we had that big fuel filter, by the way, we wouldn't be able to pull it out of the top here, so that can make it a little more pain to deal with. So with that small one, it's easy. We'll get this out on the table. Then we'll just work this loose and get that fuel filter off, set aside the clip. Then you've got one fuel line on the bottom and one fuel line on the top in this case. This is the inlet line that's connected to that fuel filter, and that's all I was going to change this time. The other line is actually part of the grommet. So if the grommet looked bad in that line, it might make sense to change those as well. But this one looked good, so I just went with the fuel line. I used my cutters to just pull on that and pull it off. I didn't cut it there, just yank it off the bottom of that fitting. And I'm going to do the same thing on the top. I'm going to use that little trick to peel the clip up and just push it off of the fitting there and remove that whole line. Then I'm just going to go to my bulk roll of fuel line, and I'm going to cut matching lines for these two lines here. There's that old grommet with that fitting. That fitting would push out and just push into the new grommet if you wanted to replace the grommet as well. So here I'm just matching up the size line. This is just black Echo fuel line. This is the stuff that we use for almost everything. There's another small clear line that comes into play a lot of times. But this black line, it doesn't hurt to have some of this around. This will fit a lot of your Shindaiwa weed eaters and a lot of your Echo weed eaters. And it goes bad in the machine, but it doesn't really, it stores well. If you have some on the shelf, it pays to have some around. Even buying a box of it is worth it to have if you're in your shop, if you're running a lot of machines. So here again, I just lube both of those ends with the WD-40 on both sides. Not totally mandatory, you can still work them on there, but if you have some, it just makes it easier. And we're gonna do our same technique with putting a little clip on. Looks like I forgot here, but you're gonna wanna, yep, there we go. So you wanna put that little clip on, and then we're gonna wanna just work that onto the fitting. We put the fuel line on part way first, just to get that started. And then I kind of push the clip up there, and then I just kind of push the whole thing on together. The line's pretty tight, but you want it to be tight. You want a good seal there. You don't want to deal with all the issues that come up from having bad fuel line. So we have that guy connected on the top. We're going to flip it around, and we're going to do the same thing on the bottom. That's where we'll connect our fuel filter. So same process here, looped up line, clip. We're just going to put that on the fuel filter and attach that clip to the bottom of the fuel filter. And then we'll do the same thing up on the top with that other fitting. Now there's one more connection where the fuel line connects to the carb on the top. I don't really think you need a clip there. I think it comes with one. You might just set that one aside if you still have it. I have never seen one come off the top other than breaking. But these other three places, especially the bottom two, where it connects to the fuel filter and where it connects to this fitting that I'm connecting now, you definitely want you know, your clips on there. Otherwise, like I said, the fuel filter will fall off, dirt will get sucked up in there, and then you'll have to get yourself a new carb, which is a lot more expensive than that little clip. So then you're gonna take your fuel filter, feed it down to the bottom there. Your short line is gonna go on the left, and your long line is gonna go on the right. And you'll want to spray a little WD-40 on the grommet just like this, just to make it easier to install. Then you're going to kind of feed it in there, and you're gonna put the back side in first and down. And that's gonna make it easier to deal with the front because you can see it and get access to it. So back side first, then you're gonna take that T-wrench or any flathead screwdriver and just work it in slowly from side to side. It'll drop right in. Then you're gonna attach those fuel lines. This is the one I was talking about that you don't really need a fuel clip for. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's never bit me. It's always worked out. So I would go ahead and just install that just without a clip there. And same for this guy, I've never seen one come off. I don't think you need the clips there. If you wanna use them, if it makes you feel better, then yeah, use them. Nope, won't hurt anything. But if you don't have them, or if you wanna use them somewhere else, then go ahead and set those aside. Then I like to, you know, I hadn't drained the tank here, so I just went ahead and pumped that bubble and to check it and make sure that everything was good before I put everything back together. So the bubble filled up nicely, felt good, so I went ahead and just put that fuel cap back on. Followed by the air box, and I put the screws in on both sides, tighten those down with my Phillips screwdriver, being careful not to strip them, get those nice and snug. Then we're gonna put the air filter back on, and then finally we'll put the air filter cover back on just like we did before. We'll go ahead and snug that down, and now we're ready to grease that head. So let's flip this thing, the whole thing over. We're gonna get the gear case on our work surface here, and I'm gonna show you how to grease this guy up. So a lot of models you can just grease right from the side. This one you actually want to remove the head to grease it. So we're gonna start by pulling out the weed eater line just to get it out of the way. We're gonna go ahead and get our 11/16 or 17 millimeter socket and fit it on there. But you see the problem here is that if you just try to turn this, it's just going to turn the head. It turns freely. So this is where our little 4 millimeter Allen wrench comes in. And it could be anything of this size. It doesn't have to be an Allen wrench. It's not an Allen hole. It's just a hole. And it's on the top of this holder here. When you spin this holder, there's a hole in the gear case. And what you want to do, there's no hole there. But when you line up with the gear case hole, you're going to see the hole open up. That's where you want to line it up. That's going to lock the string head to the gear case. So if you need to change a string head, this is exactly how you're going to do it. You're just going to get that little thing there. It could be a small screwdriver even. You want something in there that fits kind of close to the size of that hole. You want to avoid stripping that out. You want to avoid damaging the aluminum on the gear case. That gets real expensive. So now we have that head locked. We're just going to go ahead and attack this with the 17 millimeter socket. Another key thing here is that this is reverse thread. So we're going to want to go to the right to loosen it here. So this was a little awkward to do around my camera. So you'll watch me struggle with this a little bit, but you just go ahead and crack that loose. Again, turning to the right. Might be hard to tell with a ratchet, but you can see here I'm turning this bolt clockwise. It will not come off the other way. It'll just get tighter. So you definitely want to be going clockwise, not the other way. This is righty loosey, lefty tighty in this case. So we're going to go ahead and loosen this bolt off and get it off of those remaining threads there. And the cool part about this style head is that it actually pushes the old grease out. A lot of the newer weed eaters, they don't push the old grease out of your machine. They either they usually run it up the drive shaft there. So these old Shindaiwas were built well. This is where our side cutters are going to come into play again. They're going to help us remove this little collar. So nice. Oh, actually, sorry, we're going to remove that holder first. We're going to move it right out of the way. So our side cutters are actually going to remove this little guy in the back here. This little collar is what needs to come out. And this is where our old grease is going to be pushed out. That's where you'll see in a second. Side cutters works really well for this. You could probably get it out with regular pliers or something else. This is the way I learned to do it, but main thing is just getting that collar out of the way there. Then we're going to remove the fill bolt. So we have a 13 millimeter bolt there. That's just regular thread, so counterclockwise to loosen it. We're going to take this guy all the way out. Don't lose that little washer. That washer helps it seal.
and keep the grease in. We're going to set that aside, and then we're going to get our grease gun. Now with my grease gun, I have a little adapter. It's this little tip here that attaches to the end, and that makes it easy to fill through that hole. But I figure not everybody's going to have that. You can see how that just drops in and makes it easy to fill without mushing around or wasting any grease on the side or anything. But you can do it without it. If you just have a regular grease gun, you just kind of push it up to the edge here. Again, this was awkward to do around the camera. I kind of had the camera in front of my arms and reaching around it to hit it here, but you just want to hold that. I would probably push the gear case against a hard surface just to hold it in place. And then you're just gonna pump grease. And you'll see after about 7 or 8 pumps here, it started to push all this old grease out. And that grease probably started as a white color if it was the original Shindaiwa stuff. So you can see it's absorbed a lot of water and dirt and things like that. I used a paper towel to clean off the first little shot of grease there, and then I went back to it. I pretty much go until I see it mostly red or mostly white, whatever new color you have, and until it pushes out most of that gray grease. A lot of times you'll do this and the grease will be completely black too, so you'll see it. It depends what whoever was putting in there before too, but you want to go to your you start seeing it coming out mostly as your good grease there. So I was just about there here. You can see without the tip I kind of wasted a little grease on the top there, but no big deal. So you can see I'm mostly red on the bottom there. I thought that looked pretty good, so I just wiped up a bunch of that excess. And then you can go ahead and grab that collar, and we're just going to push that back in. And you'll see when this guy goes back in and you push it in, it's going to push a little grease back out to the top there. You can just wipe up that excess too, and then you have a greased gear case. All the internals are good there. We're going to take our fill bolt, make sure you still have that little washer there, and we're going to go ahead and tighten that down. You want to line up the threads here nicely as well, and make sure you tighten that by hand first. And don't go super tight. I mean, get it tight, but not super tight. We're dealing with aluminum here, so you don't want to be cross-threading that. Those gear cases are also expensive, so take your time and just get those threads nice and lined up. Now we're going to line up this holder on the star and go ahead and push it up. Then we're going to take the string head, and the back of the string head is just going to line up right there and get centered. In this case, we had a bolt and a washer on the top here. And remember, reverse thread. So we'll be going counterclockwise to thread that bolt in. And once we get that guy snug by hand, we're going to go ahead and tighten it up. So you could lock it with that same method with the Allen wrench, or just to show you here, this is how I do it. I have a little cordless impact, and I just zap it to the left a little bit. You can also remove it that way. If you have this tool, you know, you can just turn to the right and boom, you're off. It makes it quite a bit easier to take that off. But you know, if you have that tool, cool. And if not, then the Allen wrench and the locking it that way works perfectly fine. The head should spin completely freely when you're done. So here I'll show you just tightening it down with that Allen wrench in the normal way with the socket that it describes in the manual. And then we'll just get a nice little cinch down, get that tight. But like I said, the head should spin freely when you're done. It shouldn't feel locked up. If it is locked up, then something went wrong. And I just want to show you this. This is the grease packs that we sell and that you can get a lot of places. This guy comes with a top. You just cut off that top there and just snip that off. Then you can just squeeze that grease in. And so that'd be a little easier maybe if you don't have that or don't want to deal with that grease gun. And last thing here, one more thing I want to show you, this is right out of the Shindaiwa C350 manual, is the air intake for cooling. So right here where the screwdriver is touching, there's a fan in there on the flywheel, and that's actually pulling air in right through these little fins, and it's blowing air out to cool the engine. If those are blocked with grass, you're going to get some overheating issues and blow up that engine. So you really want to make sure you clear those out with your screwdriver, or maybe with some compressed air. However you clean them, just get them nice and clean.
Thank you for watching. Gila is a great organization full of dedicated volunteers that just want to help Hawaii's landscape community live up to its fullest potential. They offer education and training classes, certification of professional landscapers, and an annual trade show and conference. We hope you'll check it out. Come find out more information at gilahawaii.com. Aloha.